Hi guys, hold on for a second. Before we proceed to the video, I have something very important to tell you. Professor John V. has published his new book in collaboration with Little French Media, and the title of the book is Neoliberalism, Inequality, and Authoritarianism. This book details how neoliberalism impacts the geopolitical economy in the 21st century. You can buy it from Amazon and the link is in the description. Thank you. Now let's proceed to the video.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to part two of the gig economy and uh, the impact of artificial intelligence in the gig economy in the age of neoliberalism. Part two is going to focus on the period from the Thatcher-Reagan decade of the 1980s to the present. But before I go on with that, I want to, for those who have not seen part one, and it was only recorded 24 hours ago, so let me just give you a very brief overview of the gig economy. Very brief, and then we'll proceed with today's session on the gig economy, artificial intelligence, and neoliberalism. The gig economy takes its name after the term gig, which was used in the latter part of the 1910s, most likely by jazz musicians who refer to securing a job for the night, for the week, for the month, whatever period of time as the gig. So this term, which is designed to make work that's unregulated, without any social security, without any medical benefits, without any kind of benefits at all, without any safety regulations, without any government regulations of these freelance workers. The word is made to sound like it's a gig, it's entertainment, rather than the reality of very harsh, dehumanizing in many cases, dehumanizing when you study the details, when you look at the details of what some of these gig workers have gone through, by the way, you discover how dehumanizing. The word is designed intentionally to make it sound like it's a good thing. It's something people should welcome, accept, embrace it. Now, the gig economy involves, according to the World Bank and to the International Labor Office, the ILO, a number of people that they are not sure how many there are, but they could be anywhere in the world between 1.5 billion and 2 billion, somewhere in there. In a labor force of about 4 billion in a population on this planet of 8 billion. So we're talking about a very large number of people in the broader category of freelance workers, although the gig economy, by the way, is to be differentiated from the informal economy, because in the informal economy, the free operator may be someone like a plumber you hire, is not registered, you pay cash, person never pays taxes, you get no bill for the job, everything is under the table, so to speak. In the gig economy, it's different because gig economy means that there are large corporations invariably listed in the stock market, by the way. And these are often, a lot of people probably are aware of this, in the taxi driver business, Uber, Lyft, those types of um, operations. This is why some economists refer to the gig model as the Uberization of the economy. Um, but there are other services. People believe that it's just, those, as well as delivery of food, fast food, and all of that. But it's actually a ubiquitous business. It involves everything from the public sector to the private sector. In the first session, I mentioned that the Pentagon itself has a special division where they are looking into this issue of the gig model for workers that they would be wanting to hire. So the gig economy has that kind of an impact. One thing I did not mention in part one, this is a good point to bring it up, um, and that is that in some countries, um, the gig aspects of the gig model are inserted into labor management relations through labor policy by the government, by the state. That's very important, by the way. This, I should have mentioned it yesterday in the first part. That's a very important aspect there, because when you have the impact of the gig economy, which is unregulated work, no social security, no benefits, no safety regulations. The worker is her or his own boss. When you have, and is a contract worker, freelancer, when you have that kind of um, labor management relation, although the worker may believe, because that's what the company that hires that worker tells her or him, that he's an associate, he's a capitalist. In other words, he's part of the management team. He's an associate. They never use the word worker, they use the word associate. So they may believe that. That's fine for them. But the fact is, this is the a worker whose conditions approximate those of pre-industrial age workers, going back to the period um, when there was absolutely no government regulation, no government intervention in labor management relations, no safety net, social safety net of any kind for the worker. Now, um, that's for an overview. I also mentioned yesterday one thing, and I'm going to go on to today's focus on today's session. I also mentioned yesterday that even before the uh, institutionalization of the gig economy, which really takes off in the mid 90s. By the mid 90s, the term gig becomes more and more widely used. Before that, even before that, there had been throughout the Cold War, and especially in the 70s and in the early 80s when Thatcher and Reagan came to office, a vicious attack on trade unions. Trade unions were an anathema, are an anathema to capitalists. They hate trade unions because they can engage in labor strikes, although we don't see many labor strikes these days. They do have collective bargaining. Collective bargaining has been under attack for the last 45 years, by the way, under the neoliberal model, of which the gig economy is a part. Um, the uh, gig economy took off theoretically, although this has, as I pointed out yesterday, in part one, I should say, uh, because of technology, because of high tech, because of the apps. Technology made it possible. And in the name of efficiency, that is technological efficiency, delivering the best service to the consumer, the best product to the consumer at the fastest possible pace. In the name of all this, the um, this was used as a pretext to uh, circumvent labor laws, to circumvent the entire institutional structure of labor management relations and government oversight, and to create this to create these freelance workers um, into gig workers, and to basically pay them um, a salary, a wage that does not comply with minimum wage laws, by the way, doesn't have to, not regulated by the government, and it doesn't comply with any labor standards. Now, obviously, some of you watching may know already that the U.S. government, European governments have been looking into the gig economy, not for various reasons, not necessarily because they're losing any sleep over the working class, but they're looking into the gig economy partly because the gig model privatizes profit and socializes cost, as I mentioned in the first part of this segment of this topic on the gig economy, which means that they are unfairly benefiting while other companies that are in the formal economy don't have that advantage. So there has been that kind of dialogue going on. Why are they outside the confines? Although a number of mainstream formal economy companies are also partially using freelance, so-called gig economy model workers. Now, this uh, today's session, I want to focus on how artificial intelligence in the 21st century is revolutionizing and will revolutionize the gig model. And this is something that a lot has been written about. A lot has been written about the gig model, period, but especially when linked to artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence, obviously, is equated with progress of civilization, right? It's equated, like any technological miracle, it's equated with uh, the as the catalyst that will solve humanity's problems. Now, in the last year of the Obama administration, in 2016, the White House commissioned a study. In this report, the scientists who worked on this project concluded that yes, there are benefits to science and technology as a result of IA in everything from medical science, from surgery, to shipping, to driverless cars, to nursing homes, what have you. There is no, to agriculture, there is no limit to how beneficial artificial intelligence can be. And the report points that out very clearly. The report is favorable on that. The report also points out that AI will increase productivity immensely. However, here's the downside. The same White House report in 2016 has a caveat, which caveat has been universal. It private and public institutions, governments, think tanks have alluded to this, which is that while artificial intelligence will indeed result in higher productivity, in medical miracles, in revolutionizing a number of sectors, in everything applied in everything from mining to agriculture, fine. It will also result in an unknown percentage of workers, not just in one country where the machines will be used, but globally. We live in a world economy, integrated world economy. There's only one capitalist world economy. Corporations are global. Many multinational corporations have an impact globally. And even the ones that don't have a base everywhere, they export, they import. So we have one world economy. Investors invest globally. So artificial intelligence, according to the 2016 report of the White House during the Obama years, will in fact negatively impact the working class. Now, we don't need to have this assumption, this hypothesis. We don't need to guess. We can actually go to an actual case. We can go to a real life situation, and that is Silicon Valley in California, the center of high tech, the global center of high tech, although they're losing ground to China, and we'll talk about that too. Silicon Valley made many people millionaires, some billionaires. However, Silicon Valley, while a technological miracle applied to science as well, created many problems, social problems, not just in neighboring San Francisco, where housing is unaffordable and people who actually have jobs, the working class people, live in tents in a park, not just there, where people who actually work, they're not, in other words, not homeless people, but they're homeless although they have a job because housing is unaffordable. Why? Because the Silicon Valley millionaires and billionaires have flooded the market, drove prices up of that entire Northern California area, not just in San Francisco, by the way. And they did not, their miracles on a nationwide basis and on a world basis, their so-called tech miracles did not solve social development problems. They created wealth for investors. And that's it. They created more wealth for investors. They made more money for companies using their technology. They made money because a lot of that technology goes to the government, especially defense, but all government agencies, by the way, use that Silicon Valley technology. And when you follow the contracts that the government signs, you'll see there are multi-billion dollar contracts with Silicon Valley. They also benefited from the fact that the government, this is where neoliberalism comes in, subsidized and continues to subsidize Silicon Valley. In the so-called chips war, right? The US government has subsidized US companies making computer chips. in the name of trying to win the race in semiconductors against China. So the taxpayer foots the bill. A chunk of the cost goes to the public, goes to the taxpayer for very profitable companies. Not that the Europeans are not doing the same thing, by the way. Actually, the Europeans are providing subsidies for some of the same Silicon Valley, and I don't want to mention the companies, by the way, but they're providing this subsidies for some of the same companies that the US is subsidizing. And I should also point out, by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier, I apologize, that the European Union also commissioned a report like the Obama report of 2016, the White House report on artificial intelligence. And we'll see how this ties in with the gig economy. Where are they going to squeeze more money out of what sector? Obviously, the workers. They too commissioned, the European Union commissioned a study. Basically they arrived at some of the same conclusions, except that they went farther. They actually were much more apprehensive about the US-based multinational corporations, the high-tech companies involved in artificial intelligence. And they raised all kinds of issues for everything from privacy to protecting workers, including the gig worker, okay, who's completely unprotected. Now, the US has, in fact, the most um, gig workers in the world. It leads the world in gig workers. The population of the United States is roughly 335, 340 million. The labor force, from the last statistics I looked at, about 170 million. It is estimated. Remember, the World Bank and the ILO caution about the statistics. It is estimated that we have roughly, let me look, 76 million Americans somehow involved in the gig economy. They could have a part-time job. Gig economy, by the way, really starts with a worker who has a 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 job and figures, well, in my off hours when I get off my regular job, I'll do this and supplement my income, and maybe I'll make a lot of money. However, what's happening is that some of those workers, and this really took off, by the way, during the pandemic, the COVID period lasted about 4 years. That really took off, okay? And some of those became permanent gig workers, losing their jobs, the regular jobs, of course. Anyway, the European Union cautioned, forgot to mention about this, about some of the same things, plus they focused on the inordinate power of the multi-billion, in some cases multi-trillion-dollar companies in Silicon Valley and their role in society. So the European Union went actually farther than the Obama report with regard to artificial intelligence and its impact on the working class, including the gig workers, gig and formal economy workers, both, by the way. And remember, the gig worker model has already impacted the formal economy, the labor force in total, on a world scale, by the way, because there are gig workers all over the world, from India to Brazil to Russia. There are gig workers all over the world. The gig model is international. Now, having said that, let me come to a company that is in the business of finding gig workers. The company is called Fiverr, like a five, the English the English slang for a five note, um, um, you know, British pound, five note, and Fiverr. It was founded in 2010. It's an Israeli based company. And this company is operating in 160 countries. And its role is to make money out of the gig economy by connecting the interested party with the interested parties, the worker and the company. This company, Fiverr, one of many, by the way, there are others. I just mentioned this because I believe this is the largest one in the world. This company is very enthusiastic about artificial intelligence and the gig economy. That they're in that business, the freelance connection, connecting freelance workers with companies. Fine for them. They are very enthusiastic. They do not have the reservations that the U.S. government under Obama raised in the report. Not that that changed any policy, by the way. I want to make sure everybody understands. Neither the Europeans nor the U.S. government have done anything to alter policy to regulate. Although the Biden administration, I should point out, because some of you probably know already anyway, I should point out that the Biden administration is looking into some kind, of course, this is an election year, we don't know what will happen, but it's looking at the possibility of some regulatory mechanisms to at least uh, to inject, the Europeans are as well, by the way. Europeans are looking into that as well. So to at least inject some regulatory mechanism, some protection for gig workers, not to allow this to get out of hand. So, fair enough. This company, however, which is in this business of linking 160 countries, they're operating all over the world. They're only what, 195 countries? They're operating in 160 of them. So what we have is a company that's very enthusiastic, no concern about artificial intelligence. In fact, the apologists of artificial intelligence in the gig model point out that actually all of those people warning about and worried about the artificial intelligence impact in the labor force are wrong. Artificial intelligence is no different than any invention since the steam engine in the first industrial revolution in England. So they argued that this is an alarmist situation. It's overblown by critics, that critics need to appreciate the positive contributions that artificial intelligence is going to make. And besides, how do they know that instead of eliminating jobs, and there are estimates that it will eliminate hundreds of millions of jobs, hundreds of millions. I have seen estimates from 300 million worldwide to as many as double that. So no one knows. And I commend the World Bank and the ILO for taking a cautious stand even on the number of gig workers and freelance workers that are out there playing it safe. However, and the reason, by the way, is because you can't count these. You don't know who is in this business of the subterranean economy even before the neoliberal era of that the Thatcher Reagan decade ushers in the 1980s. It was difficult to measure. How do you measure the subterranean economy? It's very difficult. In other words, people engaged in a cash economy, unregistered, not paying taxes, outside the purview of the state. How do you track those people? In any case, It's becoming increasingly more and more possible with computers and with credit cards and so forth. And they are trying to move in that direction in some of the Western countries, at least. But I should tell you that the IA, the artificial intelligence uh, um, advancements that will be made have alarmed serious scientists, by the way, and scientists in the hard sciences, as well as social scientists, as well as people in the tech sector. And the reason is because there is, and I'm going to use this phrase, there is a race to the bottom when it comes to the pursuit of artificial intelligence applied in the gig model under neoliberalism. Because the ultimate goal, as I pointed out in the first lecture, in the first session, in part one, the only goal of the gig model as an integral part of neoliberalism is to maximize profit. The companies that provide the gig workers, in other words, the employment agencies, make no secret of that. They tell them, hire us to hire these people for you so you can make more money. They don't tell them it's good for the environment, it's good for your soul, it's good for society, it's good because it's the right thing to do, it's good for social justice. They don't say that. You will make more money. You will keep more money. The only criterion is profit, maximizing profit. No other consideration. So there is a race to the bottom, if I may be permitted, and others have used this phrase as well, by the way, I'm not the first. There is a race to the bottom here. Applying artificial intelligence to the gig model to optimize profit, to optimize efficiency. And efficiency, by the way, is the catchphrase that's used. It's the term that's used, efficiency. In the name of efficiency, we are pursuing, we're applying artificial intelligence into the gig model, and all of this will create great efficiency. And efficiency for the neoliberals, all of the, and by the way, few people, whether in business, politics, academics, journalism, or whoever, few people who are actually neoliberals and write from that perspective or speak from that perspective will ever admit they're neoliberals. They won't use that term. Their critics do, but they don't. Um, they 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 run away from the term itself. Um, Now, it's no secret that the only concern is capital accumulation. Capital accumulation is the only concern. Um, Everything else, what it does to the social fabric of society, not not their concern. And the government, here's where the government comes in, because what is the role of the government? Obviously, they're in the private sector. They're going to do whatever they can to make more money. But here's where the government plays a role to enter into the play as a player, as the intermediary, and enforce the liberal democracy social contract and impose a sense of equilibrium in society, social harmony, economic equilibrium, market equilibrium, to prevent the distortions, both in the economy, that the gig economy, and I explained it yesterday, I'll explain it again. In other words, I explained in the first segment, I'll explain it today as well. The the gig economy creates not just social distortions, bringing down wages, not just for the gig worker who don't have, they don't have to get a minimum wage, get below minimum wage. And everyone knows that minimum wage in most countries in the world, including the United States, are below poverty, by the way. They're below poverty. They have no problem paying below poverty. The goal is to maximize profit. Now, automation, again, is inevitable. It is, I don't want to sound like a Luddite. The Luddites were these people who, in England, who attacked the machines and faulted the machines instead of looking at the owner of the machines. I don't want to sound like them, that the automation in itself, in other words, the technology, the science of technology is wrong and it's bad. This is not the issue. The issue is public policy. How public policy impacts on the social contract and how the social contract distorts social development and economic development. When we have a race to the bottom, as I said earlier, what happens is that consumer demand stimulates less and less the economy, and that hastens economic contractions because you have a surplus of everything, unsold products, unsold services. If the people making products and providing services are not able to afford what they are producing, what they're creating, that means there is a surplus. And that surplus, that's what happens in cyclical recessions and depressions. This is a historical fact throughout the 500-year history of capitalism. It happened in the 1930s, the Great Depression. It happened in 2008, the Great Recession, as it was called. And it will happen again. It will take place again. These are built into the system because the worker is not compensated sufficiently to consume what the worker produces and the services the worker provides. The gig economy exacerbates this. This is the issue here, that the gig economy exacerbates this. And it does it on a world scale because these companies, notice I mentioned Fiverr, the Israeli multinational corporation, it operates in 160 countries. These companies operate globally. Okay, there is one world economy. Again, I stress this: the capitalist world economy. If the U.S. has a recession, it will spread because the U.S. is inexorably linked to the world economy. Now, one of the things that is happening, and one of the things that labor scholars have pointed out, and rightly so, and you have to give them credit for doing the empirical work on this, is that we are headed for a two-tiered labor movement. The estimate is under the application of artificial intelligence in the gig model in the neoliberal era that we're living in on a world scale. By the way, there are countries like China that have observed aspects of the neoliberal model, aspects of it. Outside of their own country, they observe it because it benefits them. Within China, they pursue a mixed economy. So they are not necessarily as impacted. This is why they had a catalytic role in uplifting the world economy during the Great Recession of 2008. They had the ability to do that because they are a quasi-statist, they pursue a quasi-statist economic model. Okay. Now, back to the issue of the scholars who point out that we're headed toward a two-tiered labor force. About a quarter of the population, the labor force on the world scale, clearly more so in the advanced capitalist country, less so in the global south. Okay, about that figure is what scholars estimate will be safe, secure, making a good wage with the application of artificial intelligence coming down the road. The most vulnerable people will be minorities and migrants, as well as women. Migrants globally, and here in Europe, of course, they're concerned about migrants, I suppose, as much as in the United States. But the issue of migrants is the migrant doesn't have many choices like the person already in the country who is born or raised as a child in the country. So they're more likely to become a worker in the gig economy because they have fewer choices. Although the gig economy, by the way, advertises as a plus the ability of the worker to have choice. They don't say anything about the absence of Social Security, the absence of minimum wage, the absence of regulation, of government regulating safety conditions and so forth. They don't talk about that. Hours, they were nothing about that. Benefits, no benefits, of course. But you have a choice. You have flexibility. That's a good thing. Take advantage of it. Well, especially the migrant workers, whether in the States or here in Europe, the migrant workers have to survive. They'll take anything just to survive. So they take the worst jobs. Many of them. I'm not saying all, but many of them take the worst jobs. Okay. So they are according to studies, they both in Europe and the States, they are the most likely to be victimized, by the way. Minorities also, again, whether in Europe or in the United States. Women is another segment of the population, by the way. And here I want to bring up an issue because there has been some research on this issue, and controversial, but I'll bring it up. And that is the role of AI, artificial intelligence, the gig model, and neoliberalism in Muslim countries. And the reason I'm bringing this up now, at this juncture, when I mention minorities and women being the most vulnerable and exploited within the gig economy, is because studies by Islamic scholars indicate, men and women, that a huge number of women will be entering into the labor force through the gig economy as IA makes more and more progress and becomes ubiquitous on this planet. It is estimated, according to studies, that 50 million women in the next 10 to 20 years, more women that already are in the labor force now, will enter the labor force. And many of them through the gig economy. The worst jobs, no regulation, low pay, and so forth. So what we have is a situation where even in Islamic countries, by the way, even in Islamic countries, and let me mention a few, by the way. Indonesia is at the top of the list where the government has been receptive to the neoliberal model historically. Kazakhstan, Turkey under Erdogan, some of the Middle Eastern countries. Pakistan has roughly, it's very difficult to gauge, but roughly 2% of the labor force already in the gig economy. India, a huge number, undetermined, but a much, much higher than Pakistan. But Pakistan is one of the countries mentioned that will be in that same category with Kazakhstan, Indonesia, and Turkey, with more and more gig workers, by the way. And the question here, the reason again I'm mentioning it is because they see more women entering into the gig economy model with the application of artificial intelligence down the road. And the projections are that this will have an impact in the labor movement overall in these countries, whether you're man or woman, whether you're in the formal economy or not, or the informal economy, which operates outside the purview of the state. So this is an important thing. The other issue, of course, is that some Muslim scholars have raised is how consistent is this with Islamic ethics, with Muslim moral precepts. Okay, that's another issue. We're not going to go into that today. Now, the question is, what is the state doing about this? It is a myth. It is a complete myth that liberals and conservatives differ, or even center left and center right and far right differ on the issue of artificial intelligence and the gig economy. They're all supporters of neoliberalism, all of them. They agree on the goals. They may differ on identity politics, on cultural issues, on lifestyle issues, but they don't differ on supporting the neoliberal model and the gig economy, which benefits capital concentration, not the worker. Okay. Now they go at each other, and you would think when you look at this, and I mentioned this in another video on the polarization, social and political polarization on a world scale. I talked about, so I'm not going to repeat all of that. But when you look at the debates, whether it's in the United States, in India, in France, for example, between Macron and Marine Le Pen, it doesn't matter where you go in the world. When you look at the debates, they make it sound like there is some substantive difference, that they differ on the goals of the social contract, when in fact they don't. They all espouse to the same neoliberal social contract, which includes supporting artificial intelligence applied in the gig economy, which results in the dehumanization of workers. So this is very clear. This is very clear. So people should not be fooled by the superficialities of the cold personality politics that's presented, and the fake debates, the superficial debates on cultural differences and ideological difference, when in fact all you need to do is follow the policy. Do they support the exact same policy? And the answer is yes, they support the exact same policy. Now, I want to, I'll try to see if I can wrap this up, because we're coming up almost in an hour. I want to talk about the impact of artificial intelligence under neoliberalism and its application in the gig model, in the gig economy. Uh, as someone who taught for decades history, political economy, and intellectual history, of course, um, ultimately you have to ask what kind of a society, what kind of civilization is being developed, is evolving right now under the neoliberal model. What kind of civilization is evolving? Where is the world going under neoliberalism? Clearly, we have the past record to see of the last 45 years, almost uninterrupted wars, almost uninterrupted wars, invariably by the core countries, US led NATO, against global South countries, and in this case, in the Ukraine, which is a proxy against Russia, which is, of course, part of the BRICS group with China, as a means to secure a greater share of global markets at a time that the Western world, the G7, which includes Japan, the G7 is retreating in the world economy, including in the domain of artificial intelligence, by the way. The semiconductor war is an important one. I mean, you can, if you ever read English, there are English newspapers and online magazines. If you ever read any of the Asian stuff, there's always a headline on the US-China competition for artificial intelligence and semiconductors and anything high tech. Clearly, that those trade wars are real, and they are very um, serious in their impact in the global economy as they raise living standards because products become expensive when tariffs are applied and sanctions are applied. That's a reality historically. It's no different now than it was 100 years. It's no different now than it was when Germany and Britain were going at it in the 19th century. Let me just put it that way. It's the exact same thing. When you have trade wars, the consumer pays the bills. And by the consumer, people who have money don't care. But the working class, the masses, pay the bills. At a time that we have seen in the last 45 years, a retreat, and you can look, by the way, at ILO statistics, International Labor Organization statistics, or any labor statistics that you can, from the AFL-CIO, or the OECD, by the way, they keep very good statistics on this. You can see that living standards for the working class and the lower middle class especially have been declining in the age of neoliberalism. And you have artificial intelligence applied to the gig economy now, and it will be applied, that pushes down even wages down even more than they already are. And the question is, as I started to say a minute ago, is where's society going with all this? Is war the only way to distract people's focus from their own problems? What is going to happen when the percentage of people, especially in the advanced capitalist countries, where they have been used to a certain lifestyle, that retreats and retreats and retreats. And there is this two-tiered world that scholars are talking about. Where is society going with all of this? I don't want to be alarmist and argue that we're headed invariably for uprisings. However, however, this is not looking good in terms of, and by the way, governments know this, and at least the Europeans have been honest enough. The European governments, the US has been reluctant in its reports to point out that, we're going to get people pouring into the streets, crying out that there's something wrong here. There's lack of social justice. We demand social justice. And they may do it in an indirect way, by the way. I want to point out something else that I should have mentioned even earlier. They may do it in a different way. And one of the ways they may do it, and we have seen this in the last 10 years, is the rise, and I'm sorry for using this word that some of you may not like, of the lumpen proletariat in the age of neoliberalism. Lumpen proletariat refers to the underclass. Lumpen, the wretched. Frantz Fanon, the great psychologist, psychiatrist, used the term. Before that, it was used in the 19th century by Marx and Engels. Lumpen proletariat are the people who are directionless. They become apathetic. They're the surplus labor army, if you will, labor force. They're the redundant workers. There is going to be more of that. The rise of the lumpen proletariat in society is actually dangerous because a group of them, just like in the 19th century where scholars were writing back then about them, they were manipulated by the far right wing groups. They still are to this day. So we have to be mindful that all of this is contributing. I mentioned earlier social chaos and social disequilibrium and problems and disharmony in society and polarization, political and social polarization. All of this is contributing to the radicalization, but it doesn't mean radicalization of the left necessarily. The segment is drifting that way, the segment. But the majority of within the lumpen proletariat group, as we have seen, look at the supporters of Bolsonaro, Modi, Trump, Marine Le Pen, Viktor Orban in Hungary. Many of these people are going to line up behind authoritarian figures. They're looking for messiah politicians, salvation. They want definitive answers. They want answers. They don't want analysis about the complexities of the economic structure and how the economy works and how artificial intelligence is applied to the gig model. That's nonsense to them. Give us an answer. And this, to me, as a historian, reminds me of the interwar period when people, once the Great Depression begins, were making similar demands. And Adolf Hitler recognized it. And he and top Nazis from Himmler to a number of others in the hierarchy argued that the masses want someone to focus on, and they want, tell them you have a solution, give them someone to hate, give them an enemy to hate, and then proceed. And of course, promise them what you will. Clearly, the Nazis and the fascists, Mussolini and Hitler, did not follow pro-labor policies. They followed pro-capital policies. I want to be very clear on that. But they were populist. So all of this is leading to right-wing populism. No wonder today in the world, some of the biggest names are right-wing populists, the biggest names in politics. And I'm afraid that's where we're headed. I think I'm going to end it there. We're 1 hour into this, and I won't tire you anymore with any of this. I would appreciate your comments. Write your comments. I will answer. I thank you very much for listening. Next time we'll have some other topic, wonderful topic. Who knows? Thank you very much for listening.